On Father's Day, my son Tony walked into my living room in Dallas, holding a bouquet of yellow roses, and asked me something that made my blood run cold. "Dad, you've been getting the $1,800 from Barb every month, right? I just want to make sure you're comfortable." I stood there frozen in my worn recliner, staring at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. $1,800? For the past 8 months, I'd been stretching my pension check so thin you could see through it, eating more beans and rice than any 58-year-old widower should have to. The name's Chuck Anderson, and I've been rattling around alone in this 3-bedroom ranch house since my wife Nancy passed 10 years ago from cancer. Until that moment on a sweltering June afternoon, I thought my biggest problems were the leaky roof over the back bedroom and a son who worked 60-hour weeks writing computer code. "Son," I said, my voice barely above a whisper as I set down my iced tea. "I haven't seen a dime." Tony's face went white as fresh paint. That's when I heard the sharp click of heels on my hardwood floor. Barbara Garcia Anderson appeared from the kitchen in her designer sundress, the kind that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She had that perfect smile plastered on her face, the one that always made the hair on my neck stand up. She had no idea that in the next few minutes, her whole carefully constructed world was about to crumble like a foundation built on sand. Let me paint you a picture of my situation. I spent 30 years managing construction projects around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, building my own contracting business from absolutely nothing. Started with a beat-up pickup truck and a toolbox full of determination. When Nancy got sick with breast cancer, I sold the company to take care of her full-time. The sale gave us enough to pay for treatments and keep the house, but after the medical bills and funeral expenses, I was left with a modest pension and Social Security. Comfortable enough for a simple life, but not exactly living high on the hog. My house sits on Maple Street in a quiet suburb where folks still wave at their neighbors. It's a solid 1970s ranch with brick siding, a carport that's seen better days, and Nancy's flower garden that I still maintain because it makes me feel close to her. The inside is simple. Wood paneling in the living room, a galley kitchen with appliances from the Clinton administration, and family photos covering every available surface. Nothing fancy, but it's paid for and it's home. Tony's my only child, and he's turned out better than I ever dared hope. He's 38 now, makes good money as a software engineer for some tech company downtown. Always been smart as a whip, that boy. Used to take apart radios when he was 10 just to see how they worked. Nancy and I were proud when he graduated from UT with his computer science degree, even prouder when he landed his first real job. But when he married Barbara Garcia Anderson 5 years ago, something changed in the family dynamic. She's originally from some wealthy family in Houston, oil money, I think, and she carries herself like she's doing the rest of us a favor by breathing the same air. Nancy never warmed up to her. Used to say Barbara had calculating eyes, and that she looked at our house like she was appraising it for auction. I figured it was just mother-in-law jealousy, but Nancy was usually right about people. So there we were on that suffocating Father's Day afternoon. The central air conditioning struggling against the Texas heat. Tony looking confused, and Barbara standing there in her $300 shoes on my $20 a yard carpet. The living room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air and casting shadows across Nancy's old furniture that I couldn't bear to replace. "Dad, that can't be right," Tony said, running his hand through his hair the way he used to when he was stumped by algebra homework. "I've been transferring $1,800 to your account every month since last October. Barb handles all the financial paperwork for us." I looked directly at Barbara. She tilted her perfectly styled head and gave me that condescending smile I'd come to despise over the years. "Oh, Chuck, you must have forgotten. I bring the cash envelope by every month, remember? You're getting older, and sometimes memory plays tricks on us. Maybe we should discuss this with your doctor at your next visit." That's when something clicked inside my head like a circuit breaker snapping into place. See, 30 years in construction teaches you to pay attention to details and trust your instincts. When someone tells you the foundation was poured properly, but you can see hairline cracks forming in the concrete, you don't ignore the evidence in front of your eyes. When a subcontractor swears he ordered the right materials, but the delivery doesn't match the invoice, you start asking hard questions. And I knew with absolute certainty that Barbara Garcia Anderson had never given me so much as a dollar bill, let alone an envelope containing $1,800. "Barbara," I said, keeping my voice steady as a level, "when exactly do you stop by with this money?" She didn't miss a beat, smooth as fresh concrete. "The 10th of every month, Chuck. Sometimes you're not home when I come by, so I slip the envelope under your front door. You know how your memory can be." Tony frowned, that vertical line appearing between his eyebrows like it used to when he was trying to solve a tough math problem. Honey, I send the transfer on the 15th of every month, not the 10th, and I do it electronically through the bank, not cash. The room went dead quiet except for the hum of my old air conditioner and the distant sound of kids playing in the Johnson's yard next door. Barbara's smile flickered for just a second, but she recovered faster than a cat landing on its feet. Oh, right, the 15th, she laughed, a sound like glass breaking. I meant I pick it up from our account on the 10th and bring it over on the 15th. You know how busy our schedules get with Tony's work projects. I nodded slowly, but inside my head I was already starting to build a case the way I used to plan construction jobs, one solid piece of evidence at a time, checking and double-checking every measurement. After they left that evening, I sat at my kitchen table under the fluorescent light that Nancy always complained made everything look green. The Formica table was the same one we'd bought at a garage sale 25 years ago, scratched and worn but still solid. I pulled out one of my old project notebooks, the spiral-bound kind I used to track job expenses and material deliveries, and started doing some math that made my stomach turn. $1,800 a month for 8 months equals $14,400. That money could have fixed my leaky roof, replaced my 1998 Chevy pickup that burns oil like a steel mill, and let me eat something besides store-brand everything at the grocery store. Instead, I'd been living like a church mouse while my daughter-in-law was apparently living it up on what should have been my support money. I started writing down everything I could remember about Barbara's monthly visits to my house. Turns out she had been stopping by about once a month, always for less than 10 minutes, always with some excuse about being late for yoga class or a hair appointment. She'd bring cheap flowers from the grocery store or a box of store-bought cookies, chat about the weather for 5 minutes, then rush off. Never once had she handed me an envelope, slipped anything under my door, or even mentioned money. The next morning, I drove my rattletrap truck to First National Bank on Main Street, where I've been doing business since Carter was president. The building is one of those old-school brick structures with tall windows and marble floors that echo when you walk. I asked to speak with Marcus Thompson, an old friend from my contracting days who'd worked his way up to branch manager after getting out of the Army. "Chuck Anderson, you old dog," Marcus said, coming out of his office with a firm handshake. He was a big man, built like the linebacker he'd been in high school, with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. "What brings you down here on a Tuesday morning?" "Need you to look into something, Marcus. Has my account received any deposits or transfers from my son Tony in the last 8 months?" Marcus led me into his office, a cramped space with motivational posters on the walls and family photos covering his desk. He pulled up my account on his computer screen, his expression growing more serious with each click. "Chuck, I'm showing your regular pension deposit in Social Security, but no transfers from Anthony Anderson. Last family transfer I see was back in February, and that was Nancy's life insurance settlement." I thanked him and walked out of that bank feeling like someone had hit me with a sledgehammer. The morning sun seemed too bright, the traffic too loud. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 10 minutes, just trying to process what I'd learned. But here's the thing about spending 30 years in construction. You learn not to panic when you discover a problem. You don't start tearing down walls or digging up foundations until you understand exactly what you're dealing with. You investigate methodically, gather all the facts, and then you make a plan to fix it the right way. Over the next 5 months, I built my case like I was managing the most important project of my life. I started keeping a detailed log in my notebook, recording every interaction with Barbara. When she visited on August 12th, I wrote down that she wore a new designer dress and drove a car I didn't recognize, a white BMW that probably cost more than my annual pension. When she called on September 3rd to cancel a visit because of a charity luncheon, I noted that I could hear restaurant noise and clinking glasses in the background. I also started paying attention to details I'd missed before. Barbara always seemed to have fresh manicures, expensive purses, and clothes with tags from stores I couldn't afford to window shop at. For someone who claimed to work part-time at a boutique, she sure lived like money was no object. The breakthrough came when I called Tony's office and asked to speak with someone in accounting. I told them I was Chuck Anderson, Tony's father, and I needed to verify some tax information about family support payments. The woman I spoke with was helpful, but careful about what she could share. "Mr. Anderson, I can confirm that your son has been making regular transfers of $1,800 on the $15,000 each month since October of last year. The transfers go to an account listed under your name, but I don't have the specific account details, an account listed under my name." That phrase stuck in my head like a splinter. I thanked her and hung up, then sat in my living room looking at the family photos on the mantle. There was Tony's high school graduation picture, him and Nancy at his college graduation, his wedding day with Barbara looking radiant in white. That's when the pieces started falling into place like dominoes in a row. I needed professional help, the kind you get from someone who understands the legal system. Lucky for me, I knew just the guy. Frank Rodriguez had been a Navy buddy before he went to law school on the GI Bill. We'd stayed in touch over the years, meeting for coffee every few months at Mel's Diner on Commerce Street. Frank's office was in one of those converted Victorian houses downtown, with creaky wooden floors and high ceilings that made you feel like you were in a movie about lawyers. His secretary, a gray-haired woman named Helen, brought us coffee and mismatched mugs while Frank listened to my story. "Chuck," Frank said, leaning back in his leather chair that had seen better decades, "this sounds like textbook elder financial abuse. In Texas, that's a third-degree felony if the amount stolen is over $2,500. You're talking about $14,400 here. What kind of proof do we need?" "Bank records showing where that money actually went. If Barbara's been intercepting these transfers, there has to be a paper trail somewhere. Money doesn't just disappear into thin air." Frank explained the legal process while I took notes in my construction notebook. "We'd need to file a formal complaint with the district attorney's office, subpoena bank records, and build a case that would hold up in court." It wasn't going to be quick or easy, but Frank seemed confident we had a strong foundation to work with. The hardest part was keeping quiet around Tony. Every Sunday, he'd come over for dinner like clockwork, and we'd sit at my kitchen table eating pot roast or fried chicken while he told me about his latest software projects. He'd always ask if I was doing okay financially, and I'd give him vague answers about getting by just fine. I could see the relief in his eyes, thinking his monthly support was helping his old man live comfortably. It was killing me to lie to my son, but Frank had been clear about strategy. If we tipped our hand too early, Barbara might cover her tracks or come up with some explanation that muddied the waters. We needed ironclad evidence before making any accusations. The breakthrough came in November when Frank's subpoena request was approved. 2 weeks later, we were sitting in his office looking at bank statements that made my blood boil. There it was in black and white. 8 transfers of $1,800 each, sent from Anthony Anderson to something called the Charles Anderson Support Trust account. But the account number wasn't mine. "Son of a bitch," I muttered, then apologized to Helen, who just smiled and said she'd heard worse. Frank spread the documents across his desk like he was laying out blueprints. "Look at this, Chuck. The account was opened last September with Barbara Garcia Anderson, listed as the primary account holder and financial power of attorney. She used your name and personal information, probably from tax documents or medical forms she had access to through Tony. The supporting documents told the whole story. Barbara had been using that stolen money for spa treatments at some fancy place in Highland Park, shopping sprees at Nordstrom, weekend trips to Austin and San Antonio, and monthly payments on a white BMW lease. She'd been living high on the hog while I counted pennies at the grocery store. But what really got my goat were the cash withdrawals. Every month, right after Tony's transfer hit the fake account, Barbara would withdraw $800 in cash. Frank and I figured she was probably telling Tony she was giving me that money in person, keeping the rest for her spending sprees. "We've got her dead to rights," Frank said, organizing the papers into neat piles. "Identity theft, elder financial abuse, fraud. The district attorney's going to love this case." I spent the next month planning the confrontation like I was managing a complex construction project. Every detail had to be perfect, every tool in place, every person knowing their role. I decided to invite Tony and Barbara over for Sunday dinner in mid-December, right before Christmas. I'd make Tony's favorite meal, Nancy's pot roast recipe with mashed potatoes and green beans, and create an atmosphere so normal and comfortable that Barbara would never see what was coming. The week before the dinner, I cleaned my house from top to bottom, polished Nancy's good china, vacuumed the carpets, even washed the windows until they sparkled. I wanted everything to look perfect, like a family celebration. Frank would be there too, just as an old friend dropping by for coffee and dessert. On the appointed Sunday, I got up early and started cooking. The smell of pot roast filled the house, mixing with the scent of the pine Christmas tree I'd put up in the corner of the living room. Nancy's nativity set was displayed on the mantle, the same ceramic figures we'd collected over 25 years of marriage. Everything looked warm and welcoming, the kind of scene Norman Rockwell would have painted. Around 4 p.m., I heard Tony's Honda Civic pull into my driveway. Through the front window, I watched them get out, Tony in a sweater and khakis, Barbara in what looked like a new outfit that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. She carried a bottle of wine and wore the kind of smile that made my teeth ache. "Dad, something smells incredible," Tony said, giving me a hug in the front hallway. The living room looked cozy with the tree lights twinkling and Nancy's old crocheted Afghans draped over the furniture. Barbara handed me the wine with that practiced smile. "Chuck, you've really outdone yourself. The house looks lovely." "Well, it's Christmas time," I said, taking their coats. "Families should be together for the holidays." We sat down to dinner at 5:30, everything laid out on Nancy's good tablecloth with the Christmas pattern. The conversation was light: Tony's work, Barbara's boutique job, my plans for the new year. I played the part of the grateful father perfectly, thanking them both for their kindness and support. Barbara seemed completely relaxed, even chatty. She talked about her holiday shopping plans and a New Year's trip they were planning to Colorado. I nodded and smiled, all while thinking about those bank statements sitting in Frank's briefcase in his car outside. During dessert, Nancy's famous apple pie with vanilla ice cream, I excused myself to answer a knock at the front door. Frank Rodriguez stood on my porch with a manila folder under his arm, playing his part perfectly. "Chuck, sorry to bother you on Sunday, but I was driving by and wanted to drop off those documents we discussed." "Frank, come on in. You remember my son Tony, and this is his wife Barbara." Frank shook hands all around, his lawyer's smile giving nothing away. I invited him to join us for coffee, and he settled into Nancy's old rocking chair in the corner of the living room. The Christmas tree lights cast a warm glow over everything, making the scene feel cozy and innocent. "Actually," I said, setting my coffee cup down on the side table, "Frank brought something I think we should all look at together." I opened the manila folder and pulled out the bank statements, spreading them across the coffee table like I was showing off family photos. Tony leaned forward, his engineer's mind immediately focusing on the numbers and account details. "What is this, Dad?" "Those are copies of where your monthly support payments have been going. Son account name, Charles Anderson Support Trust. Account holder, Barbara Garcia Anderson." The color drained from Tony's face as he read the statements. His eyes moved from document to document, taking in the transfers, the withdrawals, the spa receipts, the BMW lease payments. I watched my son's world crumble in real time, and it about broke my heart. Barb, Tony's voice was barely a whisper. "What the hell is this?" Barbara tried to maintain her composure, but I could see the panic creeping into her eyes. "This is obviously some kind of mistake, Tony. I've been bringing your father that money every month, just like we agreed." "Then where is it?" I asked calmly. "Show me one bank deposit, one receipt, one piece of paper proving you ever gave me a single dollar." She couldn't, because there wasn't any, 8 months of lies, and she had nothing to back them up. Frank cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Mrs. Anderson, opening a bank account using someone else's personal information without their consent is identity theft. Using that account to intercept funds intended for an elderly person constitutes elder financial abuse under Texas law. We're looking at potential felony charges here." "This is ridiculous," Barbara said, her voice getting shrill. "Chuck's confused. He's getting older and his memory isn't what it used to be. I've been taking care of both of you, and this is the thanks I get." That's when she made her biggest mistake. Instead of apologizing or trying to explain, she went on the attack. Started yelling about how I was a burden and how she deserved compensation for putting up with our family's drama. Tony stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. "Get out," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Get out of my father's house right now. Tony, you can't be serious. You're going to believe him over your own wife." "I'm looking at bank statements, Barb. Numbers don't lie." Barbara grabbed her purse and stormed toward the front door, but not before throwing one last desperate threat. "You'll never see a grandchild from us now, Tony. I'll make sure of that." The front door slammed so hard it rattled the windows. Frank, Tony, and I sat in my living room listening to her BMW screech out of the driveway. Frank filed the criminal charges the following week. The district attorney was very interested in our case because elder financial abuse was becoming epidemic in Texas. The investigation took 3 months, but they built an airtight case. Besides the bank fraud, they discovered Barbara had been using Tony's company credit card for personal expenses, another $6,000 in unauthorized charges. The trial lasted 8 months from start to finish. Barbara hired an expensive lawyer from Houston who tried every trick in the book. They claimed I had dementia and had been giving her the money willingly. They argued that she was just helping manage the family finances. They even tried to paint Tony as an unreliable witness because of his emotional involvement. None of it worked. Bank records don't lie. And Frank had done his homework. The jury took less than 3 hours to find her guilty on all counts. Barbara got 18 months probation, had to pay back every penny plus court costs and penalties, and was ordered to stay away from both Tony and me. The judge also awarded an additional $8,000 in punitive damages, bringing the total restitution to over $22,000. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Last I heard, Barbara had moved back to Houston and was working at her family's real estate company. Good riddance. Tony and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, like you'd repair a foundation that's been damaged. He felt guilty for trusting her, angry at himself for not seeing the signs. But that's not how I raised him to think. I told him the same thing I used to tell my construction crews. You can't prevent every accident, but you can learn from the mistakes and build stronger next time. I used the restitution money to start the Anderson Family Foundation, helping other seniors who've been financially exploited by family members. Turns out this kind of thing happens more than you'd think. We've helped 23 families recover stolen money and taught hundreds of folks how to protect themselves from scams. These days, Tony stops by every Sunday for dinner, just like before. He's dating a nice school teacher named Lisa, who actually seems to enjoy my stories about the old construction days. They're talking about getting married next year, and she's already asking for Nancy's pot roast recipe. Sometimes people ask if I'm bitter about what Barbara did. Truth is, I'm grateful. She taught me that even at 58, you can still learn important lessons about trust, family, and standing up for what's right. She also taught me that good record keeping and patience can beat fancy lawyers and crocodile tears every single time. If you're dealing with something similar, here's my advice. Document everything, trust your instincts, and don't let anyone convince you that age makes you weak. Sometimes the best victory is simply proving you're smarter than the person who tried to cheat you. Age doesn't make you weak. It gives you the experience to spot trouble coming and the patience to handle it right. The biggest mistake a thief can make is underestimating someone who spent a lifetime learning that details matter and truth always wins.